And this is a continuation of the class, UFOs, What Are They? This week I want to talk about what is the most popular theory in the United States. Not the world, but in the United States. This theory is also kind of losing some ground, but it still is the most popular, and that is that UFOs are extraterrestrials. They are beings from another world within our galaxy. And that's called the extraterrestrial theory of UFOs. I want to take a look at it from a scientific point of view. So first, let's start out with our solar system. The first four closest planets are all what we call rocky planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. And by rocky, I mean they have earth, they have soil, they have dirt that you can step on. The second set of four planets are the farthest away from the sun, and those are Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. They're all what we call gas giants or gaseous planets. They don't have any solid surface or soil that we can stand on. They're pretty much all gases. Now, if you go down into their atmosphere far enough, you will eventually get to an ocean of hydrogen and helium or methane or some other liquids. And if you keep going far enough, you'll eventually get to something frozen, but it's not going to be soil or earth or rocky material. Now, our type of life needs liquid water to exist. In the whole solar system, there's only a certain distance from the sun where liquid water can exist. And it's called the zone of habitability. And it starts after the planet Venus and ends before the planet Mars. Now that small distance is only about 0.5% of our entire solar system. So that means 0.5% of our solar system is habitable, where liquid water can exist. If you go to Mars or further away from the sun, the water becomes frozen. If you go to Venus or closer into the sun, it gets so hot that the liquid water becomes vapor. So the only planet in our solar system where water is in liquid form is on Earth. Now, the right type of planet also has to have the right type of gravity. Too big of a planet and the gravity would be too great for our type of life to develop. Too little gravity, basically we would float away or we would develop into some very strange sort of life. This planet also would have to have the right surface pressure. On Earth, this surface pressure is 14.7 pounds per square inch. This is the air pressure that is pressuring our body and our skin. Now, our body and our skin is pushing back with the same amount of pressure, so we don't really feel it. We can survive. Venus, which has about the same gravity as Earth, has a surface pressure 93 times that of Earth. So if you were to beam down to Venus, you would instantly be crushed to death. The surface pressure is 93 times that of Earth. Mars has a surface pressure much less than Earth's. So if you were to beam to Mars, your body would instantly balloon out due to the fact that the surface pressure on our bodies is much greater than the pressure pressuring in. So whatever planet that we're looking for humanoid life on, it would have to have about the same gravity, it would have to be in a zone of habitability, and it would have to have the same surface pressure. But then the planet would also have to have the right kind of atmosphere. Now on Earth, our atmosphere is 79% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. We've got a few trace elements in there. But if you go much above 21% oxygen, you'd start spontaneous fires. If you don't have as much oxygen, you couldn't breathe. Mars, their atmosphere is almost all carbon dioxide, and it's much less dense than ours. Venus's atmosphere is almost all carbon dioxide, but again, it's 93 times as dense as Earth's. Surface temperature would also have to be very limited. Now, on Earth, and you may think that this is a big variation, but it's really not, we go from about minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit to about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about a 140 degree difference. Venus, their temperature is a pretty constant 900 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt lead. So our kind of life could not exist on Venus. Mars's temperature goes from a balmy 68 degrees Fahrenheit down to minus 220 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, our type of life could not exist on that planet. It couldn't develop on that planet. This planet would also have to have a molten iron core that produces a planetary magnetic field. What's the big deal about a planetary magnetic field? Well, that magnetic field protects us from the sun's harmful particles that would destroy us right away. It brings them all into the north and the south poles. The planet would also have to be the right distance from the sun and the right axial tilt. Now, Earth's tilt is 23.5 degrees. Both of those things would produce a temperature variation of only about 140 degrees. Like I say, minus 20 to 120. Any variation in either of these, the distance from the sun or the axial tilt, would produce temperature variations in the hundreds or even thousands of degrees, and again, that would be deadly to our type of life. The planet would also have to have the right combination of minerals, metals, and soil content so we can produce things like food, and so we can make building materials like iron, steel, wood, and other products. None of the other planets in our solar system have this kind of composition, even the other rocky planets. Another thing is this planet would also have to have the right moisture and weather content to produce the right amount of cloud cover to let in the right amount of sun. Why is that important? Well, you need a certain amount of sun to grow food. We wouldn't want the sun to be so intense that it would actually burn our eyes, things like that. So you want enough cloud cover there to let a certain amount of sun in so it won't burn the crops, it won't harm our eyes, it won't stun our growth, that sort of thing. And finally, the planet would have to have an ozone layer in the upper atmosphere to protect us from the sun's harmful rays that quite honestly would fry our brains instantly if it wasn't there. It couldn't be in the lower atmosphere because ozone is poisonous to humans. Venus and Mars don't have any ozone in their atmospheres. So the sun's deadly radiation would get right through to the surface. It would fry your brain in, I don't know, maybe 2 seconds. Those are just a few things that a planet would have to have. There are so many other things that could be listed, but I think you get the idea. It's not just a planet being at the right distance from the right kind of sun or the right size that matters. There's a whole slew of things that have to be in perfect balance for human life to develop. And again, right now I'm assuming that you're coming from a Darwinian evolution viewpoint, which I know is a big assumption, and maybe we'll talk about that a little later. That's our solar system. Now, our solar system is within our galaxy. Let's talk a little bit about galaxies. Our Milky Way galaxy has about 400 billion stars in it. There are about 100 billion galaxies in the entire observable universe. That means that there's 20 trillion billion stars in our universe. Now, our Milky Way galaxy is larger than about 80% of the galaxies in the universe out there. Most galaxies are not habitable to our kind of life. Our Milky Way galaxy is about 13.7 billion light years from Earth to the outer edges of it. Now, a light year is not a time measurement, it's a distance measurement. It's the distance light travels in 1 year, which is about 6 trillion miles. So the observable universe is a little over 9 followed by 22 zeros miles. Now, much like our solar system has an habitable zone, our galaxy has an habitable zone. You get too close to the center of the galaxy and the radiation emanating from the center of it would be lethal to our kind of life. You get too far away from the center and you don't have the right kind of stars that would be beneficial to our type of life. So only about 20% of our galaxy would be considered habitable to our kind of life. Then 2/3 of all the stars in the whole universe are what we call multiple star systems. Example, the closest star to us is the Alpha Centauri system. It's about 4.3 light years away. That's maybe about 26 trillion miles. It has 3 stars that orbit around each other. If there is a planet orbiting around those stars, it would have extreme temperature ranges. Probably enough to rule out our type of life. And when I say our type of life, I'm talking about somewhat humanoid. As that planet would go around maybe one of the stars, the other 2 stars would have enough heat to it that, again, depending on where the planet is in its orbit, it could be really cold or it could be extremely hot, but it would probably be, the temperature range would probably be in the thousands of degrees. Now, how many stars are the right kind of stars that emit the right kind of light? Of all of the single stars that I'm talking about, and remember there's only one third of all the stars you see in the sky are single stars, but there are 7 types of stars, and each type has 10 subtypes. So you've got a total of about 70 different types of stars. Astronomers have said our type of life might exist within 8 types of those stars. Again, the wrong type of light could blind us, it could kill us, it could stunt our development. So with 1/3 of all the stars in the universe being single stars, only 1 of 9 of those stars would be the right kind of stars for our type of life. Then you get into the whole thing we just talked about is it the right kind of planet, is it the right distance from that star, and all of that. So, but now we have to ask, how many of these stars have planets? Well, we don't know. How many of these planets are rocky planets and not gaseous planets? How many are within the zone of habitability, where they're the right distance from this single star where water can exist in a liquid state? How many have the right gravity? How many have the right surface pressure? How many have a breathable atmosphere? How many have that protective ozone layer? How many have a planetary magnetic field? Etc., etc., etc. Then you can say, how many develop life? How many develop intelligent life? Now, out of 50,000 or more species of life on Earth, only 1 is intelligent life, and that's us, humans. And yeah, I know, sometimes I wonder about that. But how many intelligent life planets develop space travel? We're just beginning. And what's the lifetime of that civilization? In other words, how long does it exist? Even if you believe in Darwinian evolution, the chances of it happening anywhere else in the universe is almost zero. Many evolutionists believe that it's actually impossible, that it wouldn't happen by chance anywhere else. If you look on my website under fun stuff, and then you go under science, creation, and evolution, and then you go under the article that says 44 reasons why Darwinian evolution isn't viable, you'll see what I mean. And these are quotes from evolutionists. And they're saying, hey, evolution of life probably would not happen anywhere in the universe. Also, just some other questions. How could an extraterrestrial detect life on Earth? I know in almost all science fiction movies they do, but they have to do that for the story. Our sun blocks out almost any signal that the Earth emits. I know people are saying, hey, you go to a star that's 50 or 60 light years away, and they're just getting the I Love Lucy back in the 1950s. Well, that's true, but our radio and TV waves are so very weak. Those people would have to have one heck of a detector to even see them or detect them. And how would they block out the sun's signals? I mean, the sun, and I'll bring up a picture of this, it's so much bigger than the Earth, and it throws out so much more radiation and light waves than the Earth that it really effectively it would block out any signal, that any minor weak signal that we're sending out. Another thing is, how could they travel here? Faster than light travel is physically impossible, and that was proven in I believe it was 1905 by Einstein's special theory of relativity. You can't go faster than the speed of light. It is physically impossible. Not just that we haven't figured out a way to do it, it is physically impossible to do. Some people have said, well, what about a wormhole or warp drive? Well, again, so far that's impossible. Not just improbable, or not just we haven't figured it out yet. It's impossible. So any way of traveling the great distance between stars is all speculation for now. And honestly, from what we know of physics, it's outside the realm of science. So you're getting into speculation there. So these reasons and many others are why scientists just don't believe that UFOs are from other planets or other worlds. The evidence for it just doesn't add up. The question then becomes, where are the UFOs from? That's what we'll look at next. Now I'd like to talk about a theory that outside of America, in other words, the rest of the world, is coming more to embrace than the extraterrestrial theory. Americans are finally kind of coming around to this view, but it's still not the majority view here in America, but it is the majority view in the rest of the world. And that's called the interdimensional theory. And I have to explain what I mean by dimensions. We live in 4 dimensions. 3 spatial dimensions, length, width, height, and then 1 time dimension. But what if there are other dimensions? And what if these other dimensions could intersect with our 4 dimensions? Now, we know, according to physics, a body cannot occupy the same space, that's the same length, width, and height, at the same time. But what about another dimension interacting with our 3 spatial dimensions for just a brief period of time? If it could, that body would be observable in our 3 dimensions. We could even record its speed, its acceleration, etc. It could even appear and disappear instantaneously. Now, look at the following diagram I'm about to put up. If you could reduce our 4 dimensions to a 2-dimensional space, like a piece of paper, for example, then we can only observe things on that paper. We couldn't observe anything above the paper or below the paper. We could just see things on the paper. But if you had a body in another dimension, let's say a ball that was above our piece of paper, you couldn't see it until it came in contact with our piece of paper. When it does come into contact with our paper, at first it would just look like a point. But as it continues to pass through our dimension or through our piece of paper, it becomes a circle or a sphere that gets bigger and bigger. As it continues to pass through, then it would get smaller and smaller until it finally disappears. Now envision a cube passing through our paper. And again, if you look at the diagram that I have up here, its shape would appear quite differently to us. Now envision a human body passing through our paper. That would be really weird. What if these UFOs or these aliens are from another dimension? It would explain a lot. This interdimensional theory is also called the hyperspace theory, and the parallels between this theory and the UFO manifestations are numerous. But several important ones stand out. The first one is the sudden appearance and disappearance of UFOs, sometimes in as little as 1/30th of a second. That is explained if you accept the interdimensional theory. Another one is the changes in form of the UFOs, especially when they're in motion. Now, from what we had up here before, you can see a human body passing through our piece of paper. That would be incredible. At one point it would be one object, then it would seem to split up into several, and then it could come back into one again, which is what some of the UFOs do. The fact that the UFO appearance occurs as a totally real, measurable event in our space. For an object which is elaborate in shape, like either a human being or the International Space Station, for example, its appearance in our space would totally boggle our minds. I mean, like I say, even a human body passing through this piece of paper, that would be weird. That would be really hard to say, hey, it's another dimension. When UFOs enter the ground and then they reappear elsewhere, that could be explained by the fact that when the UFO enters the ground, it could switch back to its other dimension, and when it comes out of the ground, it could switch back to our dimension. Another interesting feature of this interdimensional or hyperspace theory is that while we perceive each other's outward boundaries, like if I'm looking at you, I can see your skin, I can't see your brain. Maybe the interdimensional being can see our insides as well. It's possible. To beings in this hyperspace, their reality could be much, much richer and much more substantial than anything we can perceive of or imagine. Some people, some ufologists, have called this dimension a psychic dimension. Now, to an American scientist, that's really, they don't like that. They don't like to deal in anything other than our four dimensions. But many of them are coming around to saying, hey, this makes a lot of sense. You could also even call it a spiritual dimension. Dr. Jack Valley, probably the most respected ufologist, says this: what American ufology wants to talk about is the message that UFOs are here, they're extraterrestrial, they're alien, interplanetary visitors that use nuts and bolts spacecraft. They laugh down any suggestion that there might have been UFOs in folklore in past times, the suggestion that there might be psychic phenomena that there might be phenomena that went beyond the normal extraterrestrial interpretation was something that they just couldn't accept. I'm sorry, but we have to be guided by the data. End quote. Dr. Valley is mystified by this tendency, and he calls it specifically American, and says that almost all ufology around the globe has now embraced the interdimensional theory. Thanks to the work of Dr. Valley, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, John Keel, and many others, the interdimensional theory has gotten more popular in America, and believe it or not, the rise of the New Age movement in America in the 1980s has helped it to grow. I don't know if that's a good thing, but in the rest of the world, except America, the interdimensional theory is the most popular theory for explaining UFOs. Now let's talk about alien abductions. And these are close encounters of the 4th, 5th, and 6th type. This is where we hear the alien's message. The first abduction to gain significant press notoriety was Betty and Barney Hill on September 19th, 1961, while they were driving through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, a place which, by the way, I just happened to really want to vacation at sometime. Not because of this, but because it's beautiful. They saw an enormous disc-shaped object with 2 rows of windows. They stopped and saw 6 humanoid entities through the craft's windows. They went back to driving, but their car began vibrating and they heard a beeping sound. A haze fell over the car. When they got home, they realized that 2 hours of time was unaccounted for. Barney began having problems with his ulcer, and Betty began having nightmares. Several months later, they sought out a psychiatrist. After months of hypnosis, they claimed they were taken aboard the spaceship and given humiliating medical exams by the aliens. They described the aliens as hairless, with large heads, large eyes, and grayish skins. Betty said she was given a pregnancy exam, and Barney said he had a sperm retrieval procedure. That's the first one. A typical alien abduction goes like this. They begin with the victim either driving late at night or asleep in their bed. The drivers will report strange lights in the skies or a UFO sighting. There is generally, at least in 2/3 of the cases, a blackout period that requires hypnotic regression to get at what happened. Standard recall is very, very rare. Several hours of missing time is usually reported, and UFO sightings in the same area are usually reported by other people. Abductees who are taken from their rooms when they're sleeping usually describe a bright light outside and a humming noise. 3 to 5 foot hairless aliens appear, and the victims report the onset of paralysis and a floating sensation out of their bed, either through a window or through the ceiling of the building and into the spaceship. Once inside the craft, all victims report some kind of physical exam. It's usually in a white room, and the aliens perform a head-to-toe exam with special attention to the genitalia area. Instruments are used to penetrate every part of the victim's bodies, including the nose, the sinuses, the eyes, the ears, arms, legs, feet, abdomen, chest, and genitalia. Some people feel parts of their bodies are dismembered only to be reattached later on. Some insert or object is inserted deep into the nose. We have seen these objects. Detailed analysis of these imprints show that they're of earthly origin, and they're not technologically advanced in design, and they serve no known purpose. Then, through telepathic communications, females are told their ovum is being retrieved for the purpose of reproduction. The same is said to males regarding their sperm. Some victims report feeling mentally and spiritually probed. In some UFO groups, they call this mind scan. Through this, some feel that information was being extracted from their minds or from their spirits. Then the victims are fed information, usually like the purpose of the alien visit. These messages are for the aliens to interbreed with humans to form a new hybrid race, or that humans are the creation of the aliens, and that following a great catastrophe, a new age of peace and advancement will come. Now we'll get into their message in a little bit, but that's a broad outline of it. Next, let's take a quick look at an abductee profile. In other words, what kind of people are these aliens abducting? John Mack, who is a professor of psychiatry at the Harvard School of Medicine, has done extensive research on this. And according to him, abduction can occur at almost any age, and it usually happens several times to each abductee over many years. So it's not just a one-time thing. It happens to men and women, young and old, rich and poor. The only group it doesn't seem to happen very much to is Christians. Abductees usually have already had an overwhelming interest in paranormal activities or Eastern religions or New Age worldviews. Most of them have reported a history of involvement with Ouija boards, astrology, channeling, reincarnation, telepathic communication, etc., etc. An increased risk seems to be with people who grew up in severely dysfunctional, abusive homes, especially where there was sexual abuse.